Hey, what's going on, everyone? Hope everyone has been having a good week. I am going to be having a guest on today. One of my current clients, actually, and a former professor of mine from the University of California, Irvine, that I'm kind of coaching remotely. So I'll give it a little bit, get some people to jump in. Keeneth, good to see you. Thanks for jumping in. Let me know what you have planned for this weekend. I hope everything's going well. Richard, good to see you as well. And I saw a few more other people popped in. Let me know what you guys have going on. Let me know what's new, Richard. Thanks for always joining these. Christo, let me know if I pronounce that name right. I always have trouble with names, for sure. And hope everything is well. David, good to see you. Kenneth, good. What do you got planned for the weekend? Let me know. I saw some other people jumped in. Hope everyone is doing well. I'll be interviewing one of my current clients, actually, about retirement. Being in academia his whole entire career as well. He was a professor at the University of California, Irvine. I think for probably like close to 20 years or something of that sort. And Ryan stopped drinking a month ago, and everybody said I'd noticed body differences, but not really. Let me see. So it's kind of tough to read these messages, Ryan. Sometimes they're so small. I was fit before, though, but still expected something. So yeah, Ryan, even if there are no aesthetic changes, which I'm pretty sure there are, just not drinking is already like a huge step in the right direction. And personally, if it were me, I never actually got into drinking, but I would just avoid it. Your whole entire life, I've never seen anything really positive come out of drinking. I usually just ends up with some kind of bad ending, and then the person ends up dropping drinking eventually, and then just returns back to a healthier lifestyle, etc., etc. Especially when it gets kind of carried out overhand. Plus, if you're like going out and drinking, it's like way overpriced. In terms of what you're getting in return. I'd rather definitely be spending that money on like organic food, organic coffee, like you see me drinking here, always in a glass, never in a plastic container, and stuff like that. Yep, it was to see if it helped my anxiety meds work better, but it didn't. Yeah, so there's a lot to that. I'll send you, actually, I had issues with clinical levels of issues with anxiety way back in the day. I never took medication for it. It was definitely tough to overcome. It wasn't easy, but I did like a very detailed episode on that, on steps that I took to overcome that. And obviously, there are different, not necessarily different forms of anxiety, but different reasons why anxiety arises in people too. So that individual difference is super important to take into consideration um, when pursuing a journey of how to at least get rid of clinical levels of anxiety. So that way it can kind of be more pleasant day to day, and you're not like having panic attacks and stuff of that sort in the extreme situation. Some great books to read too. It's not for everyone, but I love Dr. Stefan Walensky's work in quantum psychology. Definitely not for everyone, but I love his work. So yeah, trying to go off the meds now, tapering off will take a few months for sure. I would also like approach it holistically, work out a lot. Start eating organic food, try to only drink, for example, like what I would do is try to only drink like water. That's like 99% of the liquids I have. And then literally one cup of coffee, organic, in the morning. And that's literally all my liquids that I drink. And, sleep well, you know what I mean? Try to, be careful with what kind of circle of friends and family members you're hanging out with. That's obviously going to have a big impact on your anxiety. Also, just, your choice in occupation and career is going to have a huge impact on your anxiety for the better or for the worse, depending on the situation. Carlo, Jovan, let me know if I pronounced your name right. Um, Javid, let me know if I pronounced your name right as well. But Ryan, I've done a bunch of episodes on anxiety because I personally had it as well. Kind of basically through, I would say, like high school and college. Um, but just know there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's not an easy journey for sure. But I'll try to send you those after, actually. And hopefully maybe you'll learn some lessons from what I learned in myself. Hey Esteban, good to see you. I never use meds for anxiety. I hike, walk, paint, and or drive along the coast. Sure. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat, you know. I try to avoid, I basically never use medical drugs. There's one time I got an ear infection that spread to my jaw, and I used some antibiotics to get rid of that for sure. In emergency situations, that's a way different story. But outside of that, you know, I always take the hard path, but it's the path that needs to be taken, and that's getting to the etiology of health issues and then kind of solving it from the root cause up. And it most always, just from my observation, requires that the person change the behaviors and the belief systems that are leading to the symptoms, you know, which require, you know, a lot of change, not only internal, but obviously in their external environment as well, dietary changes, hydration changes, all of that stuff. So let me see where Gary's at and try to get him to join. Give me a second. I'm going to message him. Okay, guys. Larry, good to see you. Rainer, good to see you. It's a really good name, by the way. Um, Giovanni. Thank you. That makes it much easier. Giovanni. Um, Message Gary, and we'll try to get him on here. Carlos, the legend himself. Good to see you. Hope all is well. Great job with your progress with the program. Um, Good to see you on this live. I'm going to be interviewing one of my actually current clients. He actually already finished his fat loss phase, and he kind of started a lifestyle maintenance phase. So let me get him to jump in here. Boom. Invite. Okay. So I did a good intro, and
Hey, there we are.
hey, honestly, Gary, I was talking to people like waiting for you to get on here. I didn't even notice my earphones were on, so they totally didn't hear me. I hope they did, but
I could hear you when I was
okay.
joining.
Give me a sec.
No, no
Okay,
worries.
Gary, good to see you. I know we've been coaching together for quite a while, but I haven't actually seen you since our assessment together. So
Absolutely.
let me get these things untangled here.
And
Okay,
that's
cool.
noisy.
Okay, let me see. Let me get my notebook. Boom, boom. Okay, well, good to see you again. Thanks for jumping on.
You
I was just
bet.
giving them a little bit of background that you're in academia for your whole career. I just guessed a number. I told them you were in it for 20 years. Is that right? Okay,
Yeah.
bam.
Yeah.
See, got to play the lottery
See,
more often, you know?
you paid attention.
Yeah.
In
Yeah. So
class.
I was just telling me you're in academia. Obviously you're a professor there. I was a student at the time as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
And kind of mentioning that you're retired now and kind of transitioning retirement. So on this live, I just wanted to, you know, get the audience to share your story and maybe some challenges into retirement you had and stuff of that sort, and also your experience with the program. So I'm still kind of like trying different templates with these
Yeah.
interviews. So I think let's just start with I know you're still technically on the program, but let's start
Yeah.
with possibly just outlining why you even decided to reach out for coaching and then go through the coaching process, but then also just talk about, you know, the University of California, Irvine, which is a school like I liked, some people don't like, but to talk about your experience there and then also, you know, transitioning into retirement and stuff of that sort.
Sure. Well, the reason I reached out to you is I kept watching. I had joined the group because I knew you, and kept watching the transformations happening. And I have had, I don't know, three or four trainers, and I've been happy with the results I got, but they sort of always plateaued and stopped. And I kept watching clients of yours make amazing breakthroughs in a relatively short time. And as you know from my teaching style, uh, I teach singing and music theater. And so the secret I have found in teaching singers is to get them to think the right thing to make the sound that they want. And because performers are notoriously, they'll just think about everything but what they need to be thinking about, because anxiety and excitement and all of those other things get in the way. And as I began to talk to you, we just sort of talked before I even joined. Your approach felt very similar as far as sort of, well, the idea is to get you where you need to be. And so I joined, and we did our assessment and all that stuff, and all that seemed normal. The part that I was amazed at, and I want to say to people, is your coaching style is very, very interesting because it's, I wouldn't call it warm and fuzzy. You know, you're not a cheerleader. Not that you're negative, but you're just very clear. And the biggest statement you made to me was, well, that hit me was, if you want, you know, your goals and your behaviors have to align. I'm paraphrasing, but if you say that these are your values, and then you're behaving like this, then this is not going to work. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
bring them into alignment, and that is something I knew intuitively, but like to have it sort of put into gear for me. The biggest thing about going into retirement was for 20 years, uh, I've always been able to work harder and more than anybody else. So for 20 years, I worked 7 days a week, about 16 hours a day, and, and loved it. I mean, I love teaching. I love the one-on-one interaction. And so I don't begrudge any of that. And I did shows as I'm a musician. In addition to having an academic career, I had a professional conducting career, have a professional conducting career. And, but what I realized is my mindset was sort of that of just being of service, which is great and it's lovely. But the problem is it didn't leave enough time for me, which led to a series of like, eat when you can, you're starved, you eat the wrong stuff, you know, all of those behaviors, which ultimately are not life affirming. So having come to you at a point in my life, because I don't know that I would have been able to be successful, or maybe you would have helped turn my head on, put my head on straight for me earlier on in my career. Um, Having the time to make my time my own and decide for myself where I spend my energy. And I'm still working on this. I mean, you and I've talked even in our last session. Uh, you know, it's a constant facing, like you get to the next level of the onion and you keep working on it, and you fall off or you do something wrong, you just get back on and start wherever you are, and keep going. Academia is a wonderful career if you like, especially as we age. I think being around young people is invigorating, and young minds, and constantly showing them themselves, which I'm very good at. Um, but it can also be uh, soul sucking,
Yes.
because there's, you know, because there are so many committee meetings that you have to go on that you don't really give a rat's ass about, and only the people who are capable end up doing all the work because everybody else is too fucking lazy. Excuse me for swearing,
It's
but
okay. This
that's
is
the
an unrated page, so you can say
great.
whatever you want.
Yeah, I
No
mean, you
HR
know,
department here.
yeah, the reality of it is, working in academia is the people who make the most money are the laziest because they figured out how to milk the system. And there are people who, like, I grew up like, if you're hired to do a job, you do the best fucking job you can do, and you do it until there's no more to do. And people would ask me, "How do you teach so many hours in a day?" Well, I just kept going until there was nobody at my door when I finished, and I was proud of that. I think working with you has really helped me shift that mindset, and I think it's a spiritual thing. You know, we've been working on the quantum psychology stuff a little bit, and realizing where we fit in that has started to open up my awareness, because it is about spiritual development as much as it is about wanting to look good naked. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And if you get both, well, that's a winner. So it's about investing in oneself. And I think that's the biggest thing that you've helped me see. Whereas I am always good at helping other people find that. But, you know, somebody, when you're when you're the mentor, you need a mentor, right?
Hmm.
I mean, you need somebody who's not going to take your shit. And one of the things I will have to say about you is you are not anyone's fool, and you see right through people's stuff, and you very calmly and patiently, you just sort of and surgically boom, call it out, and by doing so you really, really help people. It's been my experience, and obviously all of us have to just look at the transformations that you've seen. I think you said something very funny to me the first time I think it was at my assessment. And he said, people, your clients divide into categories. There's the people who will do everything you say, the people who mostly do what you say and have to be nudged, and then there are people who will never do what you say, and
Hmm.
you just sort of have to let them do whatever they do. And I didn't want to be in that category, and I'm trying to, I know I'm in the middle category, and I'm trying to move more towards the first category where, like, if I just do what you say, it works, and that's all I have to do is. And I had a great conducting teacher who, when I finally let go and just said, okay, just do what the fuck Sam says. And it worked every time. And then it became so this is the transition, right? It becomes, instead of ultimately being what you say, it turns into what do I say inside my own mind and how do I behave? And that's the thing that I think you're helping me find. So you may regret asking me to do on this because I just,
No, it's okay. I actually like those the best. I like kind of coffee shop, like non-scripted podcasts the best. Not where it's like academic lectures, like here's a PowerPoint and then let's go through down one PowerPoint and another, and then basically everyone stops listening after the first PowerPoint anyways.
yeah.
But you kind of you mentioned like a bunch of really important things, especially how they apply to Western culture in particular. So first of all, you mentioned the importance of actually, especially in a leadership role or in a service industry, which is easy to be selfless, but the
Mm,
importance of actually being selfish. And I had to learn this the hard way too, and
good.
especially hard to learn it when you care so much for your students or clients. You're giving so much of your time to them and energy, and kind of really hearing them out and hearing their story and what led them to problem ABC as well.
Right, right.
But I had to learn the hard way that, dude, you have to, if you want something to last long term, and you not to be bitter towards your students or whatever, or towards your partner or
Hmm.
boss, you have to be selfish. And
Yeah.
whatever long term projects you take on, whether it be relationships or career paths, you have to make sure your needs are met first. Because if they're
Mhm.
not, and
Nobody else
there's
is
like,
going to.
yeah, and if they're not, and there's this disconnect in core values, all that's going to happen is you're going to, and this takes a little bit of time to really kick in. It doesn't happen overnight, which is the deceptive part. You're just going to start becoming bitter towards your students, like, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I'm not getting my me time in. I'm constantly tired. I want to, work out a little bit, but
Hmm.
I have all these office hours students to attend to, or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, you can paint the picture, whatever, and then you
Well, you
grow,
put yourself last,
yeah,
and
and
then
then
you
you
don't.
grow, bitter to them, and then that causes stress and anxiety, depression if that persists long enough. Then you have to form maladaptive behavior to deal with that, which could lead to poor food choices, letting yourself go even more. In the extreme cases, like medical drug abuse, probably first, and then actual like street drug abuse, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So like I always tell people, I'm like, dude, like, yes,
It's
you,
a
you
slippery slope, man.
yeah, yes, you got to be, of course, like a leader, and care for others, but you have to make sure like your needs are met first. And I kind of like almost feel sad for, you see people that go out of their way so much for people these days, because they have some resentment deep down inside, you know what I mean? Especially if they're already like letting themselves go quite a bit, but they've been kind of like in this trance of, oh, I got to be a team contributor and always putting
Right.
my needs last, et cetera, et cetera. And that
It's a
just
martyr syndrome. It's really
exactly.
easy to get into a martyr syndrome. And I will tell you, I never resented my students, but uh, I was, I, for me, and this is why I appreciate your coaching style. If they weren't there, I would go after it like a pit bull with a pork chop and pull them to where they needed to be. And what comes of that is they're not doing the work. I mean, you have a wonderful way of sort of like, here's your work, and I'm going to sit here, and you either do your work or you don't do your work. And there's no judgment per se. There's merely like, well, okay, so did you figure out what you didn't do right? I mean, you have a very wonderfully calm way of sort of, and again, maybe it's because it affected me the way positively. The fact that there was no judgment about it, just merely calling it out, I could figure out, well, yeah, what the hell are you doing this for if you're just going to do the same shit you do all the time anyway? So it's you're a great catalyst for change, and I appreciate that. You know, and I believe the external is starting to show what the internal is doing, you know, and that's a manifestation. Our bodies start to look healthy when we start to feel
Hmm.
healthy on the inside, and vice versa. When you start to feel like, when you're working and you're seeing results, that makes you want to change. You know, it's a wonderful symbiosis.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I do think I think that people who are givers, and I am one, uh, we have to balance it out. I remember one time, somebody a long time ago telling me that I was a heart person, and heart people have to filter their behaviors through their head. Like, you have to run it through your mind, and does this make logical sense? Whereas head people, logical people, have to learn to filter through their thoughts and their behaviors through their heart. And does this does this feel right? You know, and I think, again, it's about mind body balance,
Yep.
right? You can't be either this or this. So,
Yeah. And Jace, I saw a comment here. He mentioned being selfish is hard for us who love people. I
mm-hmm,
guarantee you, Gary loves his students. He's a very loving, caring guy. But the thing is, it's like with charity. You could only give as much money as you have. And
mm-hmm.
having that me time embedded into your schedule where you get your needs met will replenish that amount of energy you can give back. It's the same thing with energy and love. You know, you could only give as much love and energy as you have, you know?
And
So
that comes back, right?
exactly.
And the thing about what the work that we're doing is, I'm putting an energy at it, and it gives me something back, and the reward is almost immediate. And so the dopamine, you know, which is why this, I think people who do get off of alcohol and drugs, if they find the gym, they really can get there, because it gives them that dopamine hit that they need. And and unfortunately, for those of us who love people and give of ourselves, the the reward can come or never come. It comes late, or it
Hmm.
never comes, right? And you're so taxed and stuff. And I, you know, I still have a wide group of friends that I care for and work with, but and you know and spend time with. But I have learned that I get to put myself and my work out first, and it sort of really doesn't, you know, it shifts my mindset and gets me back into alignment. You know, I had a cold for a week and a half or 2 weeks, and I just didn't have any strength to go to the gym. And you gave me permission. You're like, look, go back when you go back, do what you can. And it's interesting. Whenever I would go, I felt better. You know, even if I had to like do a third of my regular workout. And so,
Hmm.
you know, there's a way in which the behavior, you know, it keeps you constant. It keeps you present, and I think that's valuable, enormously valuable.
Yeah, and you said one other thing in terms of like forcing people to do something. I was kind of like this in my earlier coaching career as well, but I just found it's like pretty useless. And I got this thing honestly from like some Italian mobster guy on some movie, and he's like, "Oh, Tony, you know, you can't pick people up that don't want to get up. You know, you could only
Yeah.
hold them for so long, and the second you let go, they fall back down again.
Yep.
So you could only help people that are a like ready for the change." uh, uh, First and foremost, you can kind of present the information and at best, just be an example of the change you're trying to, you want to see in the world. Because a lot of people, they're like, oh, I don't like this in the world. I don't like that in the world. Well, then first, don't be that in yourself and show
Right.
that you can be happy not being those things in yourself first. And then inevitably, as Aristotle would say, happiness is the unconditional love everyone is looking for. No matter how
Yep.
you tie it back, it's like really just being kind of happy and at peace. So they'll
Mm.
see you doing that, and they'll see you being happy, and they'll want to know what you're doing just naturally.
Yeah.
And then if they're ready for change, and if they had enough pain in their life and did a bunch of symptom management stuff that doesn't work anyways, they'll be ready to listen to your message. But until then, it's a life of pain, it's a life of pain for most people until
Yeah.
until unfortunately they wake up. And I've been there down a few paths for sure myself. I'm not above
Sure.
it, and that's just how it is. So you can't really force anyone to do something they don't really want to do anyways. But you mentioned the funny thing is you mentioned the academic laziness, and I totally saw that at UCI from time to time because I'm like, when you mentioned your hours, I'm like, well, I know a bunch of professors that definitely weren't working those hours
Hmm.
for sure. I'm like, damn, Gary, what are you doing, man?
Well, well, that was the thing. So in so you have well, there's different kind of academics, right? The people who come in and they teach the three classes, which is a lecture class, maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours at the most, and they do it twice a week, and that's what they do. And then they're home writing their books or doing their research or in their lab or whatever, which is a different kind of work. But, the kind of work I do is like you have to meet everybody one on one. It's
Hmm.
basically the same kind of work that you do. um, and you're working with everybody individually, and there's only one way to do it. And out of my stupidity, I grew a program that was way beyond one person. But rather than boundarying and say, well, this is what I'm willing to teach, and people said that, but I kept looking at the fact that there were so many students who wanted, and it's hard to say no to young, bright, hopeful people who want the information you have. And you're right about getting irritated when they didn't practice or they didn't do their thing or they didn't follow your advice. You're like, well, what the fuck are we doing this for? But the other interesting part is those same colleagues of mine who clocked in and clocked out as fast as they could, and if they could beat it by 5 minutes every day, they did. They grew to resent me because unfortunately, I'm like, well, I don't know. I'm just doing what I'm doing. I didn't ask, even when I was chairing the department, I never asked anybody to work harder than I did. So on top of teaching all those hours, I was also administering the department. And people just they resent you because you show them up. And that's another thing. It's like, well, I'm not trying to show anybody up. And so you get into an odd swing and roundabout about that. But that's where the victimology comes in, right? Because there's a part we have to acknowledge our own piece of all of that. And by my not taking care of myself first, all of those things were allowed to kind of come into fruition. So, you know, the world you the world you envision is the one you create, for yourself,
Hmm.
and that's a big piece of the puzzle. And you're very good at sort of calling, at least me, and I presume everybody, back to that sort of really simple to understand but exceedingly difficult to execute mindset. Because you have to let go of a bunch of beliefs about yourself.
Yeah, and I find that is one stumbling block that a lot of people get into with their health challenges or career challenges, or whatever, is they, for the most part, I mean, in short, they try to solve a problem with the same belief system that led to the problems. Obviously,
Yeah,
it's not going to work out well. And then, they go online for some solutions, but it's easy to take information out of context when you're looking online instead of having a person really understand your story behind why you've come upon these challenges, whatever the challenges may
yeah,
be, and then learning to retrace that and making sure you go on another path to stop those problems from
yeah,
reoccurring.
yeah.
Um, and unfortunately, it's just like I find, especially in a lot of, you can do this in any occupation, but I find in a lot of corporate work, people come to the conclusion like, my life is just unsustainable. But then the next question is, well, shit, how am I gonna like make a living?
Right,
Because if I keep this path, it's for sure unsustainable,
right,
working 50, 60, 70 hours a week behind a computer with deadline after deadline after deadline. And
right,
then always like the looming fear that you might be laid off for like literally no reason whatsoever outside of stock market fluctuations.
right,
And then you
right.
got the, like you mentioned, you hinted at, you got the office politics going on, this
Hmm.
going on, plus personal stuff going on. It's like you step back and you're like, well, shit, modern society is unsustainable for the most part. And it's true. And unfortunately, those people would have to create dramatic changes in their environment by possibly finding another occupation. Because it's the same thing
Yeah,
as like, oh, a person finishes a drug rehab program successfully and then it goes back to the exact neighborhood with the drug dealer, with their druggy
right,
friends. Like, you don't need to be a
right.
PhD in psychology and social dynamics to know that
Yeah,
that person is going to return back to drug addiction. So I find, and you're kind of in a unique situation because of the retirement thing, but I find um, if people don't change their environment, what led to the weight challenges or health challenges, and they finish a program but stay in that same environment, typically, and there are no absolutes, the challenges always return, usually with a vengeance too, because
right.
yeah.
I mean, the challenges are always there, right? doesn't matter. Even like, I got very lucky. I decided to retire early, um, because I just knew that it was no longer a place I could be healthfully. And so somewhere I knew that. But even that, even in an idealized situation, you are the cause. We are each of us the cause of our environmental challenges. Like we're a part of that puzzle. And it's very easy that the mindset you're talking about, especially, I'm working for IBM and I'm trying to go move up the ladder. And so I got to show and I got to do this and I got to do that. Well, so first of all, the fact that we aim at constant productivity, which is
Hmm.
bogus, right? Because you just can't be. The field has to lie fallow sometimes in order to be, healthy enough to grow
Hmm.
crops. But we do have that fallacy, and we participate in that fallacy, and then we participate in all the insanity that protects that fallacy. So what you're talking about is a really huge mind shift. And even if one stayed at IBM or whatever corporation and was able to do that and really hold their ground, it's of course much, much harder. But even if you find your idealized situation, you are still part of that because we were raised a certain way. We have generational trauma. Our ancestors have done it this way. It's part of human culture, but certainly American culture that we
Hmm.
carry this weird work ethic, and so it really is about changing that focus, and and it's hard. And as you say, you have gone through all of this. I mean, the reason that you're a valuable teacher and a viable teacher is you've fallen off your own wagon, whatever your story is, and you've done it enough times and you're like, well, fuck, this isn't it. So okay, well, how do I stay on the course? And you have found the way. I'm not as much of a hermit as you are. We've talked about this, that I'm much more social. So getting my eating right, like in social situations, you've really helped me sort of, okay, well, aim at this and don't go for that and stuff like that. And those are specific things that make changes on the inside when you realize that you can control certain pieces of your environment or your behavior. If you can't control your environment, you can at least control your behavior. And that's a big step.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. Like our culture these days, unfortunately, like rewards you for denying your humanness. The
Mm-hmm.
limitations of being a biological organism that basically, for the most part, like 10,000 years ago, was just living out in the forest and not having a like demanding schedule of any sort, and has evolved a central nervous system to deal with that kind of basically what you would do, go to Hawaii now or go to the whatever Sequoia National Park for
Mm-hmm.
1 year 1 week vacation is how people live pretty much
Yeah.
99.9% of their entire life, eating organic, like only wild game, wild fish,
Yep.
whatever, wild forage, etc. That is how people lived pretty much all of their life for the
It was only
bulk
organic.
majority. Yeah, for the majority of the evolution of the Homo sapien, 200,000 plus years,
Yeah.
is just this new kind of um, you know, mindset of like, oh, you're not doing your job unless you're dying for your job, like being rewarded by like not taking naps midday. Oh, you can only function off 6 hours of sleep. Although Matthew Walker, a great sleep researcher from Berkeley, shows how ridiculous that is to even preach that to other people and hear that from some health gurus saying, I get like 6 hours of sleep. I wake up at like 2 a.m. and start working there. I'm like, dude, like, no, this isn't like good information to give out to people.
Yeah. Nope.
And yeah, I mean, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say, you really hit hard on me about sleep. And I think it was in one of the lessons that you sent. And then I was like, all right, I'll try it. This is one of the places that I let go. All right, I'm going to just do what Eugene says. And I started making myself be asleep by 10 o'clock. And I'll be goddamned if that's not when a huge amount of weight began to really, just because there was enough restorative sleep, uh, that I could see it. And I'm a big believer. And if I have days where I, for whatever reason, can't get to bed by 10, or, you know, uh, I really feel the difference now. So thank you for insisting on that.
Well, let's go back to I know it's been a while at this point, but let's go back to kind of month to month of your transformation process and also some challenges that you ran into as well, because I know you're traveling a lot then and we had to
Yeah.
kind of change a lot of stuff. So let's kind of look back at month one. How was
Hmm.
month one for you? What kind of challenges did you face there? I think I think the fat loss portion of your program was like 4 months long, 5 months long,
Yeah, about 4 months
4 months
long.
long.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I, well, of course, typical A student, right? I wanted to do this the best, and so when I didn't, I mean, you pointed out to me, look, your weekly averages are going down incrementally, a little bit of time, and that's enough. It just needs to move down incrementally. And so I kind of got over myself and allowed that. And then for me, the biggest challenge was doing the Gary Busby version of what you said rather than what just was on the page. Just eat this way and it will happen. Just eat this way and it will happen. And I would eat that way, sort of, you know. And so I know that I was ameliorating my my fat loss, um, by not really being on the point. And you're like, look, these 3 days you did it perfectly. Like, look at how much weight you knocked off. Boom. But what did you do? Just copy paste, copy paste. So it's getting into that mindset that you can do the same thing. You know, a friend of mine said, just eat like a dog. You know, you eat the same thing every day and you'll be fine. Don't start varying it. So, when I would do that, it helped. So again, it was me thinking, this is sort of fucked up mindset, me thinking that I could sort of smush it and do my version of it. And it works because I'm basically doing what you're saying, basically. But when I would adhere and be strict, it was just boom, instantaneous. I also think when we addressed the sleep issue, that really helped, because that was fairly early on. Uh, I got to a certain point, so I think I had already lost, well, before I got to you, I had been up to 210 pounds, which was like, I was like, I'm 145 now, so, that's a lot of weight on my small 5'8" frame.
I'm sure it was all
And
muscle, right?
oh, if only. Yeah, tortilla face. But the problem is, so here are some of the things that you face is people like, I love to eat. I love food. I love to eat. And of course, when you love to eat, people love to feed you, which just is, and when you're filling up, when you're trying to like satiate the fact that you're so exhausted, food feels like a natural comfort. So as I try to shift that, and the interesting thing that I found in my circle of friends is people get freaked out if you refuse a second portion, or if you don't have, I'm going to just have this and not that. What's the matter? So it's also being true to yourself and your goals in the midst of even loving situations that want to challenge and make what you're doing feel wrong. And then when I began to really lose weight, people were alarmed. My friends were alarmed, like, you are losing too much weight. You're that's enough. Okay, no more, no more. I'm like, no, I actually have like 20 more pounds that I'm trying to lose of fat to then rebuild. Oh, no, 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 no. So people lovingly wanting to come from love, trying, because what you realize is, or what I realized, and you and I talked about this, is when the norm, wait, how did you say this?
Normalized pathology.
Thank you. When the norm is pathology, when you normalize pathology, that's what people see. So that's what they're going to give you. And and that's the countercultural part about what you're teaching is, let's not normalize pathology. Let's get to the actually healthy living and healthy thinking, and that makes a difference. And there's still some of my friends who think I'm too skinny. And I'm like, well, don't worry. It's a point along the way. I'm not trying to stay this small always. The point is to get my fat loss down to a really good place so that I can begin to build back up. And that's sort of the phase we're in right now. It's a lot of mindset stuff. It's a lot of facing people who quote unquote love you, but they're putting their own sort of
Hmm.
mental gymnastics on you, their own fears. And so that's a big piece of the way I teach, and I think the way you teach is I learned early on not to imbue my students with my own anxieties about singing, whatever my problems were. Like my point was, uh, you just have to figure out what works for you, and we keep doing that and keep doing that and keep doing that. I never would say to a student, okay, now here's that high note. Now it's really difficult because you got to, the minute you start making it difficult for people, they will latch on to that. And this is what you're really great at. You just keep showing us how easy it is for us. Like it's it's not that it's easy, but it's simple. And if you just
Hmm.
do the simple thing, all of a sudden it gets easier. When that becomes your habit, then it's easy. And I appreciate that about how you've worked with me. And I'm presuming that your version of that with everybody else. Obviously, I know you tailor the programs to people's mindsets and their own peccadillos. So was that helpful? I mean, did that answer the question you were asking for?
Well, from kind of like I guess outside of the industry perspective, I always try to preach, the mastery of the basics because they just work, And as a good example, I mean, look at tribesmen still. They don't have
Mm-hmm.
like a 401k plan, medical plan, education system. They don't have Tony Robbins in their corner giving them purpose in their life. They're like always like super happy, super healthy.
Right.
If you take out child mortality, they live into like super old age, like vital old age too, not like most people these days at 30, their soul dies and they're basically their biological body still keeps carrying on, unfortunately, et
Yep.
cetera, et cetera. And then they pass these belief systems down to their kids to do the same exact thing as if, like, why pass it on if it doesn't work anyways?
Right.
And then also just my grandmother that raised me off grid. So she's like almost illiterate. And I
Really?
could tell you she actually knows more about health and wellness than a lot of PhDs and MDs in this country and lived to be 87 in good vital health without ever going to the hospital, ever
Right.
going to the hospital by simply just with her environment. It's like you're forced these basics onto you.
Yeah.
You just had to do them where you wouldn't survive. But
Yeah.
just to give you an idea of like, dude, just do the freaking basics. And the problem a lot of people get mistaken with is they're easy to understand, but people think like understanding is the same as doing. And that's
No.
where their greatest mistake is. Can you,
Execution is the hard part.
yeah, and you kind of touched on that in detail. You're like, oh, well, I was kind of doing it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of falling asleep at the right time, kind of eating
Right.
well, kind of working out consistently. But it really needs to be like pretty much all the time because the biological body, unfortunately, just it deteriorates quickly.
Yeah.
So you have to have systems in place that keep you extremely consistent. And that all
Yeah.
starts with a belief system that values mental and physical health, which unfortunately in
Yep.
today's culture, people are even oblivious to what mental and physical health is. Like, I guarantee you, like, does it kind of a little bit bother you these days when you kind of chat about fat loss with your friends that think they even have a glimpse of understanding of what healthy living is, and they're trying to say like, I'm doing this, but yet they're still like 40 pounds overweight and on 5
Yeah.
medical drugs, and their faces drooping down down to
Yeah.
their stomach, but they look at you in the eye and they're like, well, it works. And I'm like,
Yeah.
dude, no, it's not
Yeah.
working. It only works because you've been in this state of unfortunately mental and physical pain for so long, and you've developed philosophies and belief systems to keep the circus running. You don't
Yeah.
even know what's right and wrong anymore. You're like completely lost. I don't know if you've experienced that, especially with your friends that are like, well, you're like, of course, compared to 210, you're like 160 now or 170. Of course, you're way
I look a lot
smaller.
better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for them, they're like, well, you're losing too much weight. You know what I mean? It's
Yep.
like, but dude, I was like 40 pounds overweight, to begin
Yeah.
with.
Yeah.
I don't know
Exactly.
your experience with that.
Yeah. No, it's true. Well, I think people, it's interesting. People like to promulgate themselves. That's why the desire to reproduce, right? So I mean, we have children, or in my case, you're an academic and you promulgate yourself, over and over again in getting other people to see it. You train people. And that's what we do. People do that in general. So they want their ideas to be the ones you latch on to. And you're absolutely right. When you're speaking from incorrect knowledge, you could be passionate about it,
Hmm.
but it's the epitome of strong but wrong, right? And so the best thing with those people is to say, well, what my answer ended up being was, well, I'm glad that's working for you, and let it go, because I'm really happy about this. It's working for me, and what I know is I feel so much better, and so it's got to be working. Well, and then there's sort of no argument for that. Like, if you tell people, well, I just feel better doing this, okay, great. They can't argue with you anymore on that level. Because I think that's a big piece of it, right? Is how, when the work you're doing is shifting people's mindsets, which means that they are going to be in conflict with the world around them who do not share that mindset. And so part of it is learning adaptive behaviors that help us navigate through that, so we're not in constant conflict with people, or we just dismiss it. You do you, boo, however you need to do that.
My dad gave me some good advice a while back, and he's like, the only real idiot is the guy that argues with an idiot. You know, that's the real idiot at the end of it. That definitely saved me a whole bunch of wrinkles throughout my life for sure. But
Yeah,
I have one challenge for people that really think their stuff is working. And I sometimes am direct with people like this just out of curiosity of where the conversation would go. I'm like, well, if it's working, why do you still have a bad back? Why are
yeah,
you still overweight? Why are you still 30 pounds overweight? Why are you on 2 medical drugs? That's not normal at all, like
right,
not healthy at all. Those are signs that there's lack of health in your life. It's not like you lack pharmaceutical drugs, you're lacking health
yeah,
that leads to health problems, which in your mind, not your mind, just in the general
yeah,
audience mind, foolishly
right,
believes it's going to be found in some pill,
yeah,
where in reality, the only way to be healthy is, I know this is crazy and you need 10 PhDs to understand this, but the only way to be healthy is to be healthy.
yeah,
And that's it.
yeah,
There's no workaround. There's no little magical pill. And guess what? There's no one that's really going to, for the most part, come and help you when you're really
right,
sick. The medical staff is extremely overworked. They're overburdened with tremendous bureaucracy, very rushed. Even if I don't even know what happened to the universal healthcare program, but even if that were to go through, I don't even know what the heck happened to it. Even that were to go through, all you're getting is just more drugs. And that
right,
system has already been proven to fail and
yeah,
be extremely costly. If you take up the total cost of medical expenses in the US and divide that per citizen, it's about $15,000 per citizen per year. And
right,
we're at
yeah,
9 out of 10 Americans right now metabolically sick.
yeah,
Also, what's the number one reason for bankruptcy in the US right now?
yeah.
Resulting in
Medical
60,
expenses.
exactly, resulting in 65% of all personal bankruptcies. Medical
But don't,
reasons.
but that's part of the circus too,
Yeah,
right? All of the stuff
it's
we're
all,
talking
yeah,
about is because there's people making profit, let us not forget, on the illness of other people.
and ignorance. Yes.
Well, yes, exactly. And so, yeah, you're right. It's cheaper to be healthy. Obviously all of the pluses of that, but somebody is not going to be making money if people are actually healthy. And it's sort of like tantamount to all of these placebo, this thing and that thing, that you take this and whatever will be, your hair will grow back tomorrow or whatever. And snake oil salespeople and all of that stuff. I mean, it's so it's again, it's one of the things that you're really good at is helping people get through the din of all of that going on and hear, like, well, it's just the basics, right? Just tax your body, feed your body, rest your body.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into the podcast. I'm curious, have you ever been confused by the labels in the grocery store? In Yevgeny's book, he demystifies the difference between caged, cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised meats. He also covers how to avoid GMOs, source high-quality water, fish, supplements, and other related topics. It's a beautifully illustrated, non-technical read that comes with a comprehensive video series and other extended learning materials. Jump on Amazon and check out the book titled Anti-Factory Farm Shopping Guide by Eugene Trufkin. Now let's dive back into the podcast.
Yeah. And just do that 7 days. 7 days a
Yeah.
week and eat real food, man, and actually have some kind of hint of happiness in your life. It doesn't even need to be like happy every day, but just some kind of general purpose, that keeps you waking up in the morning. And dude, you're ready like in the point 0.5% of the population,
Yeah.
even with just that.
Yeah.
And then if you want
Exactly.
to take it up a notch, maybe, of course, you're probably just become your own mechanic or hire some mentors to help fast track it for you, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Um, I don't know. It's just crazy, and sometimes it's kind of sad from my perspective too, especially when chatting to a lot of people, and sometimes you tell them, like, oh, buy organic food, and they're like, oh, it's too expensive. Although really for a 2,000 calorie diet, it's like 5,000 a year. But as I
Hmm.
mentioned, spoken to you a lot of times about it, it's like the average American is spending $8,000 to $16,000 a year on non-essential expenses like fast food, alcohol, their
Right.
iPhone,
Yeah.
and I'm like, a lot of times I tell them like, you're spending way more money already, and they admit
Right.
to it. A lot of them don't even counter my argument. They're like, well, yeah, you're actually right. When you break down the math, it's hard to deny just basic math.
Hmm.
And then they
But
still do
people
it.
will,
But then
of
they
course.
still do it. It's so sad because just the direct cost of being unhealthy is pretty high, but also just the indirect cost of just looking not well, feeling not well, day to day, and you feel that like every single minute of every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how under the radar it's become for most people, how almost like I mentioned, acceptable and unquestionable it is. I don't know. It's sad to see because it's also gotten tremendously worse. When I first started coaching like 15, 17 years ago, the average person coming in for coaching was like, they're already kind of fit
Hmm.
and they just needed to lose like 5 or 10 pounds or learn some new workout techniques or some more about nutrition or
Right.
whatever. But now like
Right.
people are coming in with like serious health challenges, and much younger too, like
Yeah.
mid 20s, mid 30s, which is still very young, already coming on hooked up on a bunch of medical drugs, like very overweight. And they're like, oh, my doctor told me it was my genetics. And I'm like, oh, were you like this since day one, since when you were born? You know,
Right. Right.
remember genetics, it may load the gun in some situations, but your decisions in life pull the trigger on that.
Exactly.
And there are maybe like one every few hundred cases where you will still have a health pathology because of genetic predisposition to it. But the other 999 cases out of that 1,000, if they just made behavioral lifestyle changes, those issues will be resolved at least subclinical levels where it doesn't even bother you throughout your life. This includes various cancers. You have I don't know if you had any friends die from like heart attacks. 800,000 Americans die from heart attacks every year. It's
Hmm.
so preventable.
Yeah.
800,000 bodies. Can you imagine like the military losing those kind of numbers? What an outcry that would
Yeah.
be. You wouldn't even have a military
Right.
after year one,
Yeah.
basically. But it's totally cool. It's acceptable. No one's saying anything about it.
Well, right. Again, normalized pathology, right? And you were talking to the fact that there are people with genetic predispositions for certain illnesses. Yeah, and they probably can't be like it can't be completely cured or prevented, but it can delay it or ameliorate it so it is perhaps manageable. I mean, that's the other part of living healthy is it changes everything. It changes us on the cellular level. And over time, the cells get healthier and healthier. Well, healthy cells, I mean, that's also not difficult to understand. If you're feeding the cells better stuff, they get healthier, they get stronger, you avoid certain things. So it's not luck. I mean, that's the other part. People, oh, genetics. No, it's daily consistent work if you're doing it right.
Yeah.
And but but it's interesting. So there's a lot of people, I think, sort of the folks that you're dealing with that you're not arguing with, but that you're trying to point out to them their own um, poor thinking, that are more than happy to work that hard or do that much or whatever for the story that they tell themselves about how you make your life, how you get ahead. They're working 50, 60 hours a week, they're doing all that stuff. But those same people will not do half of that portion for themselves and do that work on the inside because somehow that's I can't do that, right? So that seismic shift from pathology-based behavior to health-based behavior, that's a huge journey. And I don't know if that's sort of where you get into people's karmic journey, or I don't know how to narrate that, but it is fascinating to sort of see who could turn around, who could turn their ship around and begin to shift and feel better, and keep choosing that. Because I think one of the things that I'm aware of slightly is, if you're not careful and you don't stay conscious, you'll slip back because
Mm-hmm.
your habits will come back, right? And I'm sure you must have clients who leave you and they think they've got it all under control, and then because they don't really change anything, or without even the weekly check-in, all of a sudden 3 months later, 6 months later, and they're back to maybe not quite as bad as they were, but half as bad. Because part of it is, one of the things that I think you help people with is just the weekly conversation is, you you point people back to the truth, their truth, the larger truth, but their truth of what they need to be working on. And that's an invaluable piece of the puzzle. So thank you for that.
Yeah, to touch on that. So when I first started coaching people, I was always generally holistically minded and worked on, their schedule and
Right.
time management and stuff like that. But when I first started coaching people, it was really heavily focused on just exercise and nutrition,
Sure.
which is still like a symptom management approach to their health problems, which goes a long
Right.
way. But I
Right.
found also it didn't quite create the lasting change I was looking for in clients, because one important thing that I've noticed that I say with fat loss programs is the only fat loss program that works is the one you never have to do ever again. That's the only one. And if you have to keep doing fat loss programs over and over again, then that means it's either not the right program for you, or maybe your application of that program is incorrect too. But I added the things I added that really help create the lasting change. And if you see, I actually interview a lot of my
Yeah.
clients like 8,
Past.
10 years after, and they're still actually, if anything, in even better shape.
Yeah.
Is first of all, that the core lessons in that etiology tree that I presented in the lasting fat loss
Yep.
lesson in the program, and more currently, like Walensky's work as well. Uh,
Yeah.
Once I added those two in, especially the lasting fat loss, that etiology tree, it
Mm-hmm.
became like very clear to people that what they needed to do to create that lasting change, and why it's very important to go far and above and beyond just changing your diet and working out a little bit more, which
Mm.
is where most people stop in their journey.
Yeah.
And it's the same as telling a person sometimes with an alcohol problem that you need to stop drinking.
Right.
Obviously you need to stop drinking. That's the obvious answer, but there are obvious various variables that led to that drinking that need to be addressed for the drinking just to naturally stop on its own,
Right.
instead of being in this, I need to be more disciplined and this and that. I found,
Right.
dude, once we get your core values aligned and get your head straight, like,
There it is.
it becomes easy and doesn't require so much friction to get everything done. It just naturally flows into the direction of mental and physical wellness. And if that isn't done, then there's going to be always a lot of resistance. And that's going to be what makes it unsustainable
Yeah. Well, that's
long
the
term.
challenge, right? I mean, you just talked about it, right? It's the alignment of core values and behavior, but and staying consistent with that. But the transition from, I believe, I think it's this, and I keep trying to do this, and that doesn't work, and I keep trying to do this, and that doesn't work, until finally, it starts to align with what you really believe. So basically, health-based thinking. And when that becomes your norm, there it's what you said. It's the fat loss program that you don't ever have to think about, because you just do it that way. And your voice becomes our own personal voice inside our head, rather than, I mean, at the beginning, we're hearing your voice say, okay, don't do it this, do this, right? And it's your voice. And then over time, your clients, especially who have continued and have gotten in better shape, because they take your teaching and they internalize it, and it becomes their living. And that's the quintessence of a great teacher and a healthy mindset. So, I mean, that's the hard, but most people won't.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 probably won't.
Yeah. Unfortunately, sometimes too, people are like very tough they stay in painful situations far longer than they should be, you know?
Of course, yeah.
That's always tough to see. And I totally saw that in myself in the past too. So it's
Well,
tough to see
sure.
it in others because you understand their their pain, and also just how good they are at numbing that pain out, you know,
Yeah.
and not really
Well,
listening to it.
that's a human trait too, right? I mean, and I think that's why you have empathy for people, and that's why you're in an occupation like this where you're doing stuff because you're helping everybody who wants help, and you're leading people, you're coaxing people to their own truth. You're not pushing them there. And it's a great approach. I have to say, not that I haven't gotten off the phone with you a couple of times and been like, God damn it, I don't, I'm like, that's just me. That's just like, wake up, Gary. This is your resistance to getting better. So why don't you just try to do what the man says? You're paying him for this information. You might as well use it. Otherwise, who's the fool here? The guy taking your money or the guy giving the money and not using the advice, right?
Hmm.
So, so I really appreciate how that has all played out for us, So, and I think the other thing is your whole sort of pain-free movement, how to move through life, not just at the gym, but how to pick things up. I mean, you've helped me be super conscious of that stuff, uh, because again, it's all of a piece, right? You're trying to help the whole organism, not just one tiny bit of it. And I think
Yeah.
that's the biggest difference about your training is that it's really holistic, not just, you know, here's how you do a bench press. It's that too, but it's not just that.
Well, you mentioned it way in the beginning that you had a bunch of, like, a few coaches. You said like two or three other coaches. Can you
Hmm.
kind of explain? I'm just curious of, you mentioned you saw some results in the beginning, but then it staled out and then there's no results. What do you feel was the reason for that in those approaches?
I think because those were rather than being holistic, it's not that they didn't think they were being holistic. And these are really good people with, I think I have good technique as far as lifting and stuff is not concerned. And so it's not that, and it's not that they didn't talk about healthy eating and stuff like that, but it was not a holistic approach, and it did not get at the biggest problem, which was right in here, right? Like how I believed about stuff, because they either didn't have that information or didn't invest in producing that information for me. And so, I also think that I may not, my piece of it is I may not have been ready for more than what they had to offer.
Hmm.
So, so when I was ready for you, and I will, and something you don't know, I've never talked, I thought about it, nah, thought about it, nah, and then one day I just like, fuck it, So, uh, and that shift had to happen inside of me. So I would say the biggest difference is why I was successful was A, I was ready for it, and that's on me. B, your approach is getting at the root of the issue, not just sort of the situational things. And so that's B. And C, that you took the time on your end to figure out what is going to make it work. Do you know what I mean? Like, how do I, what are all the things that I have to get people to find the best way to stay? And you've done the work. And again, probably some of it through your own, whoops, I didn't do it, your own quote unquote mistakes, failing a couple of times, but you're failing forward. And I think that's made the biggest shift, right? I think you're also attracting people who are ready when they come to you. And if they aren't ready for you, they probably fall by the wayside. They stop, or right? So,
Yeah.
right? And so the people who have ears to hear can hear your message, and begin to follow it. And even then, we still have to fight our own demons and our own challenges, but that's all part of the process. And I have to say, I feel like you're there for me, not holding my hand, but you're there for me as an accountability coach, kind of like, well, okay, you fucked up. You ate, what do you expect? You ate a pie. This hasn't happened, but you ate a whole pie in a day. Well, what do you think is going to happen, right? Right? If you're not eating the way we're talking about, that's what's going to happen. So, and whatever that sort of thing might be. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think other people, I will tell you, Eugene, you do not settle, right? You just, the truth is the truth is the truth. Here it is. I can back it up with scientific evidence. I can back it up with socio-personal evidence. I can back, however anybody wants to come at you with their challenge of the truth, the basic truths about it all, you can shoot that down because you've done your work. Other people, I think other trainers are just happy to get their sort of trainer's license and certificate so that they can make a living in the gym helping people. And it's not that that's bad, and there are some people for whom that can work, but it's not going to create lasting change. And I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
difference, is you're getting at the piece. Like, you almost start from the get-go. Here's what has to change inside of you, and the whole alignment of your core values. I mean, that's huge. That alone would start to begin to, people would find it much more slowly, but they would begin to find that if that was the only thing you were teaching people,
Mm-hmm.
but you're teaching that on top of, okay, let's do the exercises in this format and this many reps. And, because you've done all of that work and you understand how physiognomy changes and what you have to do and how you have to tax the muscles this way, that way, it's all the pieces of the puzzle, which is why I think you're successful and why I feel that I've become to be successful working with you.
Well, what was your take? Did you have any hesitation about like the online aspect? Because for your listeners, I actually never even seen Gary in person during the whole entire coaching process. It was just like once a week phone calls, and basically he was able to text me with any questions during the week, of course, and
Yeah.
stuff of that sort. Uh, but did that run through your mind? Because oftentimes people associate like in-person coaching, which is like what coaching actually is, as good quality coaching. But in fact, in reality, it's oftentimes the complete opposite of who stays with in-person coaching and stuff of that sort in terms of the career path.
Partly because I enjoy conversations. I do say, I do feel that I would enjoy, I'm sure, the in-person experience with you. But, and so, yeah, well, and also I teach, I mean, I coach people one-on-one in person. So my mindset is that. Uh, but what I realized that the online coaching, and I've never met you in face to face and barely seen you, like we don't even do video coaching. Uh, it forces the responsibility on me. And so, even in that subtle modality thing, like the way you do it, it makes me have to be responsible. Like, and so there's a place where, like, if I needed to have you in the room, to do all of that stuff, whatever, it would, uh, I there's a way in which I'm not as responsible what you do, and like.
Oh, I think your sound went out a little bit. Did it turn off? Let's see. Oh, maybe your earphones went off. They ran out of batteries. All right, technical difficulties. Can you hear me? Can you go like this? Can you hear me? I can't hear you. Can you hear me, dear? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Yeah, it might be my sound, huh? Okay, give me one sec, guys. Let me see if I could type.
Oh, wait, can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Can you
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay, one
Oh,
sec. Let me see
oh,
if it was my earphones. Can you hear me?
hello. I can hear you.
Okay, cool. I think it maybe
Yeah.
your earphones probably ran out of batteries or something, or no?
No, a call came in. I
Oh, got it.
got rid
Okay.
of it, and then all of a sudden it all went kaflooey. I forget where I was. Uh,
Online
oh,
coaching.
online coaching. Yeah. So it forces me to be responsible, right? And I said, sometimes I get off the phone with you to be irritated. And then what I realized is because I had to be responsible, right? You weren't going to bear any of that responsibility. And so I would say maybe it's not for everybody, but if you're ready to take the step, if you're ready to own your own personal responsibility and do your work, then it's, because I can get whatever I need from you. Like I can get whatever I ask for. You've never not had an answer. So that's what you're there for, to advise, to guide, and to answer questions. So
Yeah, and I find a lot of times if people are seeking that kind of micromanagement, it's never going to work out long term, anyways.
yeah,
Because it's like that example I gave you with the Italian. You can't pick someone up that doesn't want to stand up themselves and walk themselves
right.
eventually. It's just not fair to the person. And also, it just, for most people, becomes financially not realistic. I mean, a good in-person trainer is going to be charging at least, like in your area, $100 an hour. And you
Yeah,
coming in times a week, that's $300. That's like $1,200 a month,
yeah,
times 12 months, that could add up to quite a bit. So it's like,
yeah,
what's your strategy then? You have two options. You either just keep paying 20,000 a year or whatever it is for the coaching,
right.
or learn how to do it on your own and become your own mechanic, which inevitably eventually you're going to have to do anyways, because once again, the biological body depreciates so quickly. You
Hmm.
have to know how the machine works to be able to kind of navigate it successfully throughout life. And there's a small example of, okay, you could hire a coach for 20,000 a year for the rest of your life. Few people can do that, but not many. And I think at the end of the day, also just a lot of people want that independence, as well.
Well, right? I mean, ultimately, we we live and die by our choices, right? I mean, that's the end of conversation, beginning and ending of the conversation. So at some point, you have to realize that you're the one making the choices and choose wisely. Choose health, choose alignment, choose, all that stuff. And I think the way you do the coaching, it again pushes that energy back on the client, on me. I can only speak for myself, and I have to face up to that. And it's, you're not going to scold me if I didn't, because you understand. You've also been there. You've done it. You've fallen off the horse plenty of times. So I think that's a piece of the puzzle too. Uh, it's okay to not be perfect at it for a while, but you get more perfect and more perfect. And when you start to see the results, it becomes something that you want to do, not just I have to do.
Yeah, I mean, what's the other option? Just remain overweight and unhealthy. That's not easy.
Yeah.
That's not
And for
easy at
some
all,
people, they
anyway.
do that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's their choice, right? But I mean, and it better for you, I would say, because I'm thinking that you're working with a level of client that wants to get better by and large.
Yes. And I'm lucky to attract that situation. Of course, not every time, like maybe 1 out of 20 does come in and they don't understand that they're going to have to change more than just their workout and nutrition program to really see like what they're
Yeah.
looking for at the end of the day. And then they're like, it's not for me or whatever. And that happens. And that's okay. It's just not, they're not ready for real change and still want to kind of, keep playing the games until the real pain teacher comes around, and then they're forced to change.
Right.
Because if they don't, then their life gets really miserable really fast. But one industry secret for those guys seeking out coaching, usually with really good and competent in-person coaches, they don't really coach you either. They might assess you in person, spend about 3 to 4 hours assessing you, and then maybe do like some kind of introduction thing for like a week or something. But then really they just give you the program and you do it, and they typically kind of answer your questions via email and stuff of that sort. That's why they charge, $300, $400, $500 an hour, because they're really seeing you just for a couple of hours,
Mm-hmm.
So there's another thing. Typically, if like they're just like actually like rep counting for you and stuff of that sort, uh, typically the most competent trainers aren't going to stay at that level in their career. They may start that way for
Right.
sure, but then they progress more over to kind of consulting roles. Here's your organization, here are the problems, here's what needs to be done. I'll oversee it maybe for a few weeks, and then I'll teach your managers or whatever to resolve these issues. But then that's it. You're on your own from there. It's not like I'm going to be working here 8 hours a day, babysitting everyone and making sure there's this kind of like daddy child relationship, where now you're dependent on this daddy figure to kind of tell you, which diapers to wear and
Mm-hmm.
what to say, what not to say, to do your chores, whatever.
Right.
Because it's not fair for the client to put him in that dependent role either. Uh, it might be a good business
Even
model
though
for
they
some
might.
people.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the client would like it better, because who doesn't want to be babied on a certain level? There's a part of us that we all want to have somebody take care of us.
sure. It just can't become, in my opinion, like a default
Of course.
personality that the person then lives their whole entire life by, and stuff of that sort.
Well,
So
yeah, because you're being responsible to people. I mean, as opposed to, this is the difference, right? It's not that you aren't making money and it's not a career for you, because it is, but you are not doing it in a way that it's about, fooling other people that they need this, that, and the other thing so that they give you more and more money. It's not capitalism in that regard. We're paying for your knowledge, and we're paying for your administrative ability to sort of look at what is going on and address it, and help us manage it. But again, we're the person who has to make that happen. And until people are ready to take responsibility for that, they they won't. That's the
yeah,
end,
very true.
and the end of that conversation. So,
Yeah, very true. Well, Gary, one last thing I wanted to touch on, because I feel this is an important topic, and you actually brought it up on one of our calls, and then you kind of changed your mind actually, maybe like a few months after that call, where you mentioned, oh, Eugene, you get to a certain age, you're like invisible in the world,
uh,
you know? And I don't believe that, in my opinion, because I still have mentors that are 50, like Paul Chek is like 55 or 54,
mhm.
and they're like extremely vital and extremely healthy, and they still like attract so many people to them, you know what I mean? And I remember you're like, well, I remember then you mentioning like when I got in better shape and presented more vital energy, all of a sudden people started talking to me more and stuff of that sort. And I think that is a struggle with people, especially going into like maybe retirement or an older age. They just do feel kind of invisible. But I think the reason for that is typically they're very unhealthy. They don't really bring great energy, which kind of pushes people away as well. And they just don't look well because they don't take care of themselves. So obviously it's easy to look over them to someone that might be more vital or full of energy. Can you kind of maybe elaborate on that or?
Sure. Well, I was specifically speaking because I'm a gay man that, at a certain point in a gay man's journey, um, to to a certain mindset, there's a period where you just become invisible. Now, I have become visible again recently. I think it's a little bit of the body stuff, but what you're talking about is true, in as much as it isn't even necessarily the physical look, how one looks physically, but rather what they're emanating. And you get to a certain point in your life. Well, and I'm going to say, so that's one truth. The other truth is, in the larger toxicity of our culture, and the subset of the gay culture, you know, uh, young is the only thing there's, we have new is the only thing that is any good. Young is the only thing that's any good. You're past 30, you're dead. There's a toxicity in that mindset as well.
Mhm.
But of course, if you buy into that mindset, you begin to portray and exude that. And if you are past that point, uh, what happens is you believe it, and so therefore you, again, what you believe, you create, and that's what you see. So I think it's multiple things all working together. I I think that, I have no doubt about my own personal charisma. I'm a performer. I can walk into a room and turn it on, and I can make people look at me. I have that capacity. But I personally don't want to perform all the time, right?
Hmm.
That's not the way I like to walk through life. I'd much rather have these kind of conversations, which are meaningful and honest and self-revealing. And non-performative, I don't need to do the performance of Gary. I'd rather just be Gary. But in so doing, uh, uh, I can't help, because we all publish who we are, right? Whether we're trying to or not. What we believe is what we put out in the world. And if I believed that I was invisible or past my prime or this or that or not, well, that's what people are going to see, right? And so circling back to something that I've said multiple times today is, when you get, and it's something it was the thing that clicked for me, when you are aligned with your core values, what do you want from your life? What do you believe is true? And you start living that behavior, then everything else changes. And and there's a piece of that, which is, people who do not see you do not need to be in your life anymore. And that's the other piece, right? That if it's to the better that somebody doesn't see me, good, I don't have to deal with you. But the people who do see me, can see me, will see me, are people that I want to engage with. Does that sort of?
Yeah, totally. And I was just going to actually ask you a question about that. Well, the people that are so shallow, to presume, just to look at you for your looks. I mean, um, I think it's like a good thing that they actually kind of, their low IQ and kind of shallow existence disappears anyways from your life, because it's not going to really add much more than
Exactly.
sugar highs, maybe with a lot of pain and um, in the long term. If you kind of get into relationships with these type of people anyways, they'll um, maybe fun to go to like a weekend party with, but then outside of that, if you're actually living with these people day to day, it's a pretty uh, it's not going to be a pleasant experience, because these people are operating a lower vibrational frequency of what's actually like important in the world as well. And typically, I presume, and this is maybe me projecting, but kind of have a lower IQ, general IQ overall, especially
Certainly a lower emotional IQ
that.
and a
Yeah.
spiritual IQ, right? Like, because, I mean, they can be very smart, but that doesn't mean that they have any sense of how the soul operates, how, about vibration, right? Like, I well, we can have another whole conversation about this, but like, you're absolutely right. Low frequency is where things like bad behavior, cheating, lying, stealing, murder, is all low frequency stuff, right? It's people behave out of that when all that they see is their only option, or that's where they vibrate, and that's their journey. And so, to this conversation specifically about people being blind to me or invisible, I am invisible to them, I have learned, and I've begun to realize, well, yeah, I only want to be visible to people who are going to bring good stuff into my life. And the more I focus on that, again, it's like the basics of tax your body, rest your body, feed your body well. Like, it's not complicated. And if we can just live in that space, then the other stuff starts to fall away. And you are only, like, what's happening, I think, in your practice, you're not beginning, but you consistently attracting people who are ready for you. And if they're not ready for you, they don't come, or they bounce early.
Yeah.
And all to the good, because it means that your practice is, you actually probably, I hope, enjoy all of the phone calls you make during the day, and it's balanced out with, the time for yourself and your own working out and your eating and all the stuff that you do, that you sort of share with us how you operate your days and weeks.
Yeah.
you know?
Gary, I do want to expand on this a little bit more. I really got to go pee though. Can you give me like two
Okay.
minutes and then are you okay with continuing for another like
Yeah,
10 minutes or so? Because I think this is
absolutely.
an important topic, and I feel like just that mindset of being like a bit shallow. Not every man in gay culture is like this, of course. So there are no absolutes. I don't want to overgeneralize,
Right.
but a decent percentage of them, I feel, just are fairly shallow in their thinking. And I feel this actually holds back the overall happiness and well-being of the community. Because in
It
a way,
does.
you do want a tribe, you know? You don't want to be living in a cave alone. And unfortunately, when the tribe is
Talk.
like a large percentage, yeah, a large percentage of the tribe is toxic. I don't know the exact number, but I would say just from personal observation, like let's say 60%, you know,
Yeah,
65%.
about that.
It's like very shallow, very kind of like money, like surface level
Yeah.
motivational driven image, money. I got
Hmm.
pecs, a booty, whatever, you
Right.
know, and nothing else is existing in their mind except maybe like two cockroaches running around and competing for space. And I feel like I
Or
feel
something.
it just kind of it hurts the community overall. Like the community can progress to a higher level of well-being and just existence if they really just got rid of that that pathology type of surface
What,
level of thinking. But let me just run to the bathroom really quick.
uh,
Sorry, guys.
okay. Remember, Voltaire said, "You can't catch good health."
Okay,
Balzac. Okay.
I'll be back in 1 second.
All right. So I'm all alone with everybody, huh? You guys are just seeing the inside of my kitchen. Opa.
Okay, you know you've been holding it for a while if like you start peeing and it just like doesn't stop, you know, for a while.
And it's like, oh my gosh, yeah.
Anyways, but
Sorry.
yeah, definitely before we close it out, I wanted to cover this topic because it is something that a lot of gay males struggle with. I've heard a lot of them complain about it, you know, the shallow kind of existence, especially when you're looking for meaningful relationships with people, you know, and how difficult it is. And I feel the community itself is making it difficult for the community. I don't know what
Well,
your
right.
experience with that is, or if you can kind of shine some light on it from your perspective.
Yeah, well, let's just remember that the gay community has, we are still not an integrated part of our cultural society. We're still pushed aside, you know, and so any rights and privileges and all that stuff are recently won, but they're still not integrated. In other words, John Q. American Family, if they have a gay kid, by and large, there's an issue, and the kid has to figure out how to, because they're different from their family. So you get, where the gay community is in of itself an island of misfit toys at the get go, and that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just a bunch of wounded people coming together, and those wounds play out
Hmm.
in a variety of ways. That is, those wounds are fed by the larger culture, even if, because we do know this, that gay culture has led the way. I think a lot of straight men are more about physique and going to the gym and stuff, because gay men led that way and were way ahead of the curve as far as being gym bunnies and all of that stuff. So even though there's a weird transference of who's leading who, but that aside, the predominant culture, which is heteronormative, what does the predominant American culture, world culture, value? It values stuff. It values new. It values expensive. All of those things that are not lasting and not ultimately important. It values a high-paying job. It values living right. All of those things, and that gets the thing about subcultures is they are a grotesque, and I don't mean that gay people are grotesque, but like they become, in Yiddish, the word is ungepatschki, like frittery, a caricature version of the larger thing. And it plays itself out. I also think that gay men, especially, I can't say I'm not a lesbian, I'm not a woman, so gay men struggle with their own sense of value. When you're struggling, so vis-a-vis, like wrapping it in this conversation we're having about core values, right? If you're struggling with your own core value about what it means to be you, are you valuable? Are you lovable? Are you this, that, and the other thing? If you're questioning that, of course, your picker, your viewer is going to be skewed because of your own. It's like my friends telling me that I was too slender, had lost too much weight, right? Because they are 20 pounds overweight and that's normative to them. Therefore, they look at me being weight I should be as being too skinny, right? So somewhat similarly, if you believe that your only commerce as a gay man is your looks or your youth, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times I see people out or at the gym or whatever, and they've had so much plastic surgery, they don't even look like people anymore. They look like versions of like George Lucas created them in the studio. And, they may have a great body, but like, if you're no longer a person here, there's one of the, at UCI, this is a true story. There was a professor, Pete Odegaard, Eugene Loring, who was the first chair of the dance department, and he came back one summer after having a facelift, and Pete Odegaard said to him, "Eugene, is that you in there?" when he had his facelift. But the reality of it is, we're chasing after something so I've made a commitment. There's no plastic surgery on this face and isn't going to be. And it's not like I don't have wrinkles and other stuff. I'm 56 years old and I'm proud of that. Here's the deal. If we only value simple and stupid and surface level things, that's all we're ever going to get.
Mm-hmm. And
B. So, but just like you could preach your gospel, the gospel of Eugene, to people who are not willing to hear it, and they may lose the argument, they may give in that they don't, but they're not going to change, right? So too, until people are ready to look for something better than what they think they deserve or yearn for more connective relationships, doesn't mean you have to have less sex or you have to, it just means that, for example, you're actually able to be present to another person. And that is the quintessence of intimacy. Like, right? It's not just when it's convenient, but that you actually consider, I have a friend, this friend is in a bad way. I'm going to go over and spend some time with them, take some time out of my life. Or I'm going to honor the commitment. I agreed to meet you for dinner last night. I'm not going to call at the last minute. I got a better offer. I'm going to go party with so-and-so. I mean, it's those kinds of behaviors that until you don't want that done to you, you realize you don't do that to people. Again, it's simple, like the golden rule, right? Treat others as you would be treated. So it's a large, complex issue, and where the tendrils go, some of that is written in our larger culture, and some of that is specific to people who feel that they are not good enough by virtue of the fact that they are different than the predominant culture. And until that difference becomes celebrated and acknowledged and accepted inside and then outside, it won't begin to change, right? And the other piece of it is gay people are different than straight people. I mean, aside from the sexual practices and who they're attracted to, gay people have different sensibilities. We have different intelligences. Not all of us, but many of us, and we have different wisdoms. Until that becomes something that you lead with and you accept it as your gift, guess what? It's a detriment, right? So we have to begin to see that in ourselves, and then all like the basic stuff, right? The basic truths that you've talked about, it begins to stack up, and you begin to live your core values. But it's a long road, and this is the thing. It's like the people who are bound and determined that it's better to be on a bunch of medication than it is to eat well and get some exercise. If that's how they want to do it, you can't change them. Like, you can't change them. If gay people want to be shallow, if gay men want to be shallow, and it's just about the size of your dick or how big your booty is, or how big your biceps are, if that's how you do it, if that's what does it for you, well, then you're not going to see people who have value coming at you from a different place, right? And so it's that more metamorphosis of the internal and the external working together in some cosmic sense that I don't have the languaging to be able to express, but it is something in that.
Yeah.
Does any of that make sense?
Most of it. I'm not going to say all of it makes sense, but most of
Okay.
it for me. But
Yeah.
great, yeah, a great topic to discuss, and I'm pretty sure just on a lot of people's minds um, in the gay community, especially since I do hear a lot of people talking about that. They're like, oh, it's so hard to find like a decent relationship, which I think is just a general rule across the board for everyone, because I mean, first of all, you're approaching a lot of people that are living very unhealthy lives, which kind of clouds their mental
Yeah.
state. You'll be surprised how many people in my coaching program, they're like 45, and it's the first time they even looked over their core values or even thought about them.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I never even thought about this my whole life, like what I actually want to be doing, like that's
Yeah.
actually like a large percentage of people. As Walensky would say, I love his work for sure. He would say like, well, if you don't know who you are, then what do you know? You know nothing.
Exactly.
It's not
Right.
like you can get half pregnant, And I love that. I love that
My God.
saying. It's not like you can get half pregnant. It's either you know who you are or you don't. And if you
Yeah.
don't know who you are, like, dude, how do you know which relationship to get into? How do you know which job to pursue? How do you know which hobbies to pursue? How do you know even like anything? You,
Yeah.
you don't even know the core foundation to every single one of your actions, which is like who you are. And and obviously your chances of getting in the wrong relationships are huge.
Well,
And
and sometimes the wrong relationship is there to teach you,
there's that
okay,
aspect.
well, that didn't work. Okay. And again, we are constantly evolving, right? So if we're keeping growing, what you get into a relationship at a certain point because it's what you deserve or what you see for yourself or the best you can do, or the only person like, it's the place where it happens. And then if you keep growing, and hopefully both of you keep growing, you may grow away from each other, and that's the natural evolution of stuff. And then it's time for another relationship, which is different than serial monogamy. Oh, well, we ran into a rough patch. Goodbye. And then
Hmm.
I'll repeat this. That's, I'm not talking that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, if you don't know who you are, then how can you ever guess to find? And on the other piece of it is, until you are coming from your center first, then you're just trying to fit in. I love the Walensky thing about the exercise about if you're to separate from the narrative you tell yourself about a big emotion, anger or sadness, right? And then just separate from that and go back and be it. And then what's the story and all that stuff. But he says, but if you're doing this to make it go away, to move it to a different chakra, you're trying to avoid it. And you have to deal with it until you no longer are trying to avoid it. And I think that's the piece of the puzzle, right? Like, if we're trying to find the right partner to make all the rest of the stuff go away, it's not going to work because you're pinning it on somebody else. The work is inside, and the work is facing yourself daily, and that's hard, you know. Falling down. It's meeting yourself at the gym. It's meeting yourself at what you choose to eat. It's meeting yourself at getting your sleep. You know, all those basic things which set you up to be able to examine yourself and live the examined life, right? And that's a different thing. And also, it shrinks the people that you might be, the numbers of people you might be viable to connect with, because a lot of people aren't doing that work.
Yeah, which is totally okay too. I'd say like, dude, if you even have like one or two good people in your life, that's really all you need for the most part, and then just be great to them as well. Um, I know like right now, that's basically where I'm at. You know, I have my girlfriend I've been with for like close to 8 years already, and
Hmm.
then like maybe one or two good friends. And then obviously my parents are, I was totally
Yeah.
lucked out and got great parents as well. And stuff of that sort. But to go on your topic, yeah, Walensky, or moreover his mentor, always told him like, oh,
Well,
you know, in order to know who you are, you have to first know who you are not.
who are
But
you are not.
yeah, by getting in the wrong relationships, but then learning from them, thanking that relationship, not being bitter about it, but saying like, oh, thanks for showing me what I don't want in my next path or my next chapter in life,
Right.
and stuff of that sort. So
Yeah.
Gary, honestly, it was good to see you again.
Yeah.
It's been, I don't know, like 5 months already since I saw you during our assessment.
Right.
But are there any other topics you would like to discuss, or we can close it out? It's totally up to you.
No,
I'm
I
free
don't
for the
think I
rest
have anything.
of the day, so I don't have anything
I, I,
scheduled.
I think that what you finding out who you're not is a big piece of the puzzle, because I think the people who aren't ready for you, I mean, the place of empathy is that they're just finding out who they're not, and hopefully they will find out who they're not. It's not this, it's not medicine, it's not, you know, being overweight, it's not this, it's not that. And then this is what I feel like, you know, I was ready to come to you and do this kind of work. And I didn't know I was until I was, right? Like, that's the mystery of it all. We're all just bumbling around trying to figure it out. What is it? Ram Dass says, we're all just walking each other home, you know?
Hmm.
And that's the mystique of the human experience, right? That, hell, we don't really know. I mean, we're doing our best, you know? So
Go.
anyway, thanks for your time,
Thank
and
you, Gary.
thanks for the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, and thanks who sat on this call. Just remember, always put your mental and physical health first, because when you don't, misery will always follow close behind. Okay, guys, so
Amen.
keep that true. And then have a good weekend, everyone, and thanks for jumping in, Gary. Good to see you again.
Take
Thanks for
care.
joining on this one. Okay,
You
take
bet.
care, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning into the podcast. If you've ever had trouble losing weight, or you've lost weight, but still didn't have the ideal body or health you're aiming for, please feel free to reach out anytime and book an assessment. Eugene will work with you to cover your goals in detail, see what's holding you back, and go from there. In the meantime, feel free to check out the countless testimonials on Eugene's website in the link below. In the testimonial section, you'll notice everyone has various backgrounds, are of all different ages, and all have had different challenges in their life, but they all have one thing in common: they were all able to find their health and achieve their ideal body. You're also welcome to add yourself to the Facebook group in the link below. There you'll have access to the live videos that Eugene does weekly on Sundays, and other helpful content. Thank you again for tuning in.